It's a quiet Sunday afternoon. Your phone lights up on the table. One new message. It's from your mother. For a moment, you just stare at the screen. Your chest tightens in that familiar way. You read the preview, something casual, maybe even friendly. Haven't heard from you in a while. Hope you're okay. And yet, your thumb doesn't move.
Not because you're busy, not because you didn't see it, but because somewhere deep in your body, something says, if I open that door, everything comes back. The guilt, the arguments, the old roles you never chose but somehow kept playing for years. So you flip the phone face down, and immediately another feeling creeps in. Doubt. Am I being cruel? Is something wrong with me for doing this? But there is a quieter psychological story behind people who cut off their family. And once you understand it, the way you see this decision and the people who make it might change completely. Because walking away from family is one of the most socially condemned choices a person can make. But psychologically, it's often not about rejection. It's about survival.
Back in the 1970s, psychiatrist Murray Bowen, one of the pioneers of family systems theory, noticed something interesting in his research. Families don't just share genetics, they share emotional systems, invisible patterns that pull people into certain roles again and again. The peacemaker, the responsible one, the problem child, the emotional caretaker. And these roles can become so deeply ingrained that even as adults, people unconsciously slip back into them the moment they interact with family. You might be a confident professional at work, a calm friend in your social life, but the second you're back in your childhood home, something shifts. Suddenly, you're 12 years old again.
Your voice changes. Your patience disappears. Old frustrations rise like they never left. It's one of the strangest experiences in psychology, the way family can freeze us in time. And for some people, after years of trying to break those roles, they eventually realize something uncomfortable. Distance is the only thing that actually works.
Now, from the outside, this can look cold, or dramatic, or selfish. But psychologically, cutting off family is rarely impulsive. In fact, studies from the University of Cambridge in the early 2000s looking at adult estrangement found something surprising. Most people who become estranged from family members spend years, sometimes decades, trying to repair the relationship first. They try conversations, boundaries, compromises, apologies. They hope the dynamic will change. But when the system stays the same, something inside them slowly reaches a breaking point. Because family dynamics can create what psychologists call chronic emotional activation. Your nervous system never fully relaxes around certain people, not because you hate them, but because your brain has learned that interactions with them bring stress, criticism, or emotional volatility. Your body starts anticipating the pattern before it even happens. Your heart rate rises when the phone rings. Your mind rehearses arguments that haven't even started yet. Neuroscientists studying stress responses have found that repeated emotional conflict activates the same cortisol pathways as other chronic stressors. Over time, your brain begins associating certain relationships with danger, even if the danger is purely emotional. So the brain does what it's designed to do. It protects you, sometimes by creating distance. And here's the part people rarely talk about. People who cut off family are often the ones who cared the most for the longest. Think about it. If someone truly felt nothing toward their family, they wouldn't feel torn about leaving.
The pain of estrangement usually comes from the opposite place, a deep desire for the relationship to work. But there's another psychological pattern at play here, something called boundary collapse. In healthy relationships, boundaries exist almost invisibly. You can disagree without it becoming a war. You can say no without being punished. You can have a different life without being guilted for it. But in some families, boundaries are treated like betrayal. Your choices are seen as disloyalty.
Your independence is interpreted as rejection. And over time, the person trying to create healthy distance starts hearing the same message again and again. You're selfish. You've changed. Family should come first. The irony is that these accusations often appear the moment someone starts developing healthier boundaries.
Because boundaries disrupt systems. They change the rules. And systems, especially family systems, don't like change. There's an old psychological principle known as homeostasis. It means systems naturally try to maintain stability, even if that stability is unhealthy. So when one person stops playing their role, the entire family often pushes back. The peacemaker tries to restore harmony. The critic becomes louder. The guilt intensifies. Not because everyone is consciously manipulative, but because the system is trying to pull things back to normal. And for the person attempting to step outside that system, it can feel exhausting, like trying to swim against a current that never stops. Eventually, some people make a choice that feels both terrifying and relieving. They step out of the water entirely.
This is the moment people call cutting off. But psychologically, it's often more accurate to call it detaching from a pattern. Another interesting layer to this is identity. Family is supposed to be where we belong, where we're understood, where we're accepted without conditions. So when that belonging doesn't exist, or comes with emotional costs, it creates a deep internal conflict, because humans are wired for attachment.
Psychologist John Bowlby's attachment theory showed that our early bonds shape how we experience relationships for the rest of our lives. When those bonds are inconsistent or emotionally painful, the brain doesn't simply erase the attachment, it holds on to it. That's why people who cut off family often still feel guilt, sadness, and longing. Estrangement doesn't remove the attachment system, it just removes the proximity. And this creates one of the strangest emotional states a person can experience: grieving people who are still alive. Grieving the parents you wished you had. Grieving the sibling relationship that never quite worked. Grieving the version of family that exists in movies and memories, but not in your actual life. That grief can be quiet, private, hard to explain to others, because society tends to see family relationships as unconditional by default. If someone distances themselves, the assumption is usually simple: they must be the problem. But the psychology is almost never that simple. Here's something else that often appears in people who choose distance: a strong sensitivity to emotional patterns. Many of them spent years studying the dynamics of their family, even if they didn't realize it at the time. They noticed the contradictions, the cycles, the way certain conversations always ended the same way. This awareness is exhausting when you're inside the system, but it also creates a hidden strength. People who eventually step away from unhealthy family dynamics often become incredibly skilled at recognizing emotional patterns in other relationships. They become better at spotting manipulation, better at setting boundaries, better at building chosen families, friends, partners, communities that operate on healthier emotional terms. In other words, the same sensitivity that once made them feel overwhelmed becomes a tool. But none of this erases the cost, because estrangement creates its own feedback loops. Friends might say things like, "But they're still your parents." Partners might struggle to understand the history. Holidays can feel complicated, and sometimes the person themselves wonders if they overreacted, if maybe they should try again. And sometimes they do. Estrangement isn't always permanent. Relationships evolve. People grow. Some families eventually rebuild connections in healthier ways. But even when distance remains, something important often changes inside the person who left. For the first time, their nervous system learns what peace feels like. No arguments waiting around the corner.
No emotional roles they have to perform, just space. And in that space, people start discovering who they are outside the family script. Their opinions become clearer, their voice becomes steadier, their life becomes something they're actively choosing, not something they're constantly defending. And this is the part many outsiders never see. Cutting off family isn't just about ending something.
It's often about starting a completely different relationship with yourself. Remember that phone on the table at the beginning? The message waiting on the screen? To someone else, ignoring that message might look harsh, but inside the mind of the person holding the phone, it's rarely about punishment.
It's about protecting the version of themselves they fought so hard to become. Because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do isn't fixing a relationship. Sometimes it's stepping away from a pattern that was quietly breaking them. And if you've ever found yourself in that strange, lonely space, torn between loyalty and self-preservation, you're not broken. You're responding to a system your mind and body learned over many years.
Your brain isn't trying to destroy connection. It's trying to protect your emotional stability. And understanding that can change the way you see yourself. Now, if parts of this story felt uncomfortably familiar, there's another psychological pattern that might explain even more about your wiring, especially why some people become extremely sensitive to emotional dynamics in the first place. So if you want to understand that side of yourself a little deeper, I'd really recommend watching the next video about why some people naturally keep their circle very small and the hidden psychology behind it. Because once you see that pattern, a lot of your past relationships suddenly start making much more sense.